There's a lot of like Christian watchdog YouTubers who all they do is like try to expose people. I looked up one day and saw you were creating content. And I was like, yo, what is up with Ruslan just saying this about this person or that person? Like, how do you feel when people are upset by that?
Great question. Now, I think the tough part is
even the idea of masculinity. Don't bring that up. It feels like patriarchy to even talk about what it means to be a man.
Patriarchy in and of itself is not bad. Patriarchy just means that the man is the head of the household. Why is that a bad thing? Right?
Just so you know, they're coming
for
you.
And that's fair, come for me. I do feel like when women meet a masculine, competent man that is able to provide, they tend to.
This is The Deep End with Lecrae.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, on The Deep End today, we have somebody that I have known for quite a long time. This gentleman is a lot of different things, okay? First of all, you know, he's actually a very talented MC. People currently may not know that because they've been following his podcast, which has been killing it for quite a bit of time. He is an entrepreneur. He has a lot of incredible commentary on culture and faith. And, you know, we want to have a candid conversation with my guy, Ruslan, man. Ruslan KD in the building, man.
This is great, man.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Man.
Glad we were able to make the back and forth work.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
I'm grateful for it, man.
Yeah.
So, you know, people probably know you for your podcast in this era. You know what I mean? I knew you years back as a rapper.
The Breaks.
The Breaks was the rap group with Belief, who's actually another he's a media personality
Juggernaut.
Yeah, well, yeah. So, and, you know, I looked up one day and saw you were creating content. What was the impetus for this? Like, what started that? Like, oh, I'm about to start creating content online and starting to have commentary.
Yeah. Well, let me just say this. I want to say something. When we first met, and I don't know if you remember this, but I was hanging out with Sho Baraka.
Yeah.
He brought me around, and I remember you guys were doing a tour. You just did a show at the Rock Church.
Yep.
And you guys were in a spot where you would not stay in hotels. You would get a hotel for a couple hours. Everybody was showering, and y'all get on a tour bus.
Yep.
And I remember you coming down the stairs, and I obviously had known a Rebel and all this kind of stuff after Rebel. And I remember you knowing who I was and being excited to meet me. And that when you're just trying to get it out the mud and you're just holding on for dear life, trying to survive, just for someone that's like, at that point, you know, you were crushing it within the Christian rap space. That meant a lot, and it was really dope. Just that like acknowledgement of like, yo, it's the Breaks. What up? Like your energy was so great.
Yeah.
And I remember that moment vividly of you coming down the stairs and just being like, just excited and knowing who I was.
Genuinely excited.
It was dope, man. So the content was interesting in that it was natural, meaning that I quit my job in 2015 at a church. I was doing the media at the church. So I was running this, but for the Sunday morning service.
How'd you learn how to do that?
We just finessed it, bro. I started editing music videos. So remember the video we shot together? I actually edited that video.
Okay.
Yeah, Sam shot it and color graded it, but I did the editing back in 2011. So I was just early to it.
Okay.
And then because I could edit video, my best friend Daniel, who was already the youth pastor, was like, hey, we can get you a job at the church and you do the video announcents. So I did that, did the video announcements for a while, and then they were like, hey, we want to increase our broadcast stream. You need to get a video switcher. And I was like, what's a video switcher? And he's running a video switcher. So I learned that, learned broadcasting, learned all that, got to teach. So I was on staff for 2 years. I quit my job. This is right as Soul Rebel was about to come out. So we got some momentum. We know there's some money coming in. We booked our own tour. So I quit my job in 2015, and the YouTube was, well, I'm not going to be in the studio 8 hours a day rapping.
Okay.
I got to do something else with my time.
Okay.
I know how to use a camera. I know how to edit. Casey Neistat's doing these vlogs.
Casey Neistat.
Yeah, remember that era? Let me do my day as a full-time rapper. That was day one, June 1st, 2015. I did a full vlog of my day, my first day as a full-time rapper.
Okay.
And then I had to kind of stop because Soul Rebel was coming out. I was doing almost everything on that. And I stopped, and then once kind of Dream Junkies faded and all that stuff, I had time on my hands again. So I came back, and it was more like Christian Gary V talking head videos for rappers. And then that evolved into like, people were like, what do you think of my music? You know, you get those like, what do you think of my music?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not listening to your trash music.
Yeah.
So I was like, but there's a lot of demand. So I built a Patreon and said, I'll review your music for $10 a month or $20 a month. And I just started live streaming, cutting with a video switcher. And people would send me their music, and the music was awful for that first 6 months. But the feedback, all of a sudden, the music's getting good. Like we're changing it. So that gave me the ability to stabilize my living expenses because I wasn't as dependent on music. That Patreon community. So I was making a couple grand a month doing that. 2020 comes around. So 2019, every single day I did a vlog, podcast clip every day for 2019. Mike Mack's event, I'm interviewing Mike LV. I'm just interviewing everything. This is when Anike was still Wande. I had her on. I had Derek Minor on. 2020, the pandemic happens.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I can't interview no one. I can't do no shows. I can't, because I was still dependent on music. So I started live streaming. And then I remember like that those first couple times hitting the algorithm, reacting to like Nick Cannon saying something crazy or whatever. And I actually reacted to an old clip of you when they polished your shoes.
Oh my God.
Just reacted to different stuff, bro. And basically what was happening was my audience was asking me about these things. Did you see this clip with Lecrae?
You're doing this on
live stream.
Okay.
And people are asking me what I think about certain things.
So you're live streaming it, but then are you then posting it on YouTube?
I'm pulling stuff up live.
Yeah.
I'm live streaming and live reactions, and then I'm going in the back end of the YouTube editor and clipping things into individual videos. And so I just started flooding YouTube. Some days it'd be up to 6-7 clips a day if something was real hot.
Yeah.
And it just so happened this is right when everything is locking down and the pandemic is everyone's at home.
Yeah.
And I'm just people asking me what I think, because it was initially just music, and then on the music reviews, they'd be like, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And then I would start clipping those parts. And then before I know it, like I started touching the algorithm, and in November or October, somewhere in there, the end of 2020, basically, I had KB come on, and I had a pretty fierce debate with another creator that I'm not going to mention, and those two things popped, and my channel went from like 15,000 to like 70,000. And my first ad check since came in, I hired Zach. Zach was already doing like my videos, John Keith's video. He actually shot a video for RG back in the day that Reach paid for.
Okay.
So Zach was already around. He sunsets his business. I take my first little bit of money, give it to him, and he comes on, and then like boom, that instant, now there's someone else doing this with me, and he helped scale everything, thumbnails, and now he's like an on-air personality with us. So that's how the pivot happened. It was very organic and gradual, and I wasn't trying to be a Christian YouTuber. I didn't even know what that was. I was just trying to people, my audience would ask me, I tell what I think about stuff, and then I found myself talking about faith.
Well, because that's the worldview that you have, so that was gonna fuel the commentary that you gave out.
Right.
And I guess for me, when I started watching it, I've always known you to be a thoughtful person. Like I was like, every time we have a conversation, you have some thoughts about something. Like you're not very surface level. But like when I started watching it, I was like, oh, he's sharing those same thoughts to the whole wide world about different things. And I don't know if so me and Propaganda Prop is another mutual friend that we have, Tunnel Rats. We always had this conversation. I was like, yo, what is up with Ruslan like just saying this about this person or that person? Like he's not even thinking about this person may come back or have something negative to say. And Prop had an interesting theory. I don't know if it's true. You can speak to it. But he was like, well, you got to look at Ruslan's country of origin and like the way that interaction happens there. It's not like Western. America's more like suggestive. We're more like, hey, do you mind if you move your car? And he was saying where Ruslan's from, it would be more like you probably should move your car because I got to get out.
Move your car now. I got to go to work. What are you doing?
So tell me about that. Like talk to me.
That's an astute observation from Prop. So yes, one aspect is I tend to just be straight to the point.
Yeah.
Just say what I'm thinking.
Yes.
Sometimes to a fault. I don't really pull punches, and I think that's good. I think that's healthy.
Yeah.
The flip side to that is this though. There would be conversations where you and me would have conversations, and we would talk about certain things, and certain people will come up. And I till this day, I get calls from somebody about someone else, and what do you think? This man said that, and I'm like, there's so much entertainment and value in the candor that we have privately. Let me just show that to the world. Because here's the deal. If we're not supposed to be talking about people behind their back privately, then why are we talking about it publicly? Right? So I just like, I'm going to keep the same exact energy that I have with all my pastor friends, that I have with all my rapper friends behind the scenes, and I'm going to talk about it the same way, and then I'll button it up and I'll tighten it up as I go. Because there's a line of like, you know, are you slandering someone? Are you gossiping about someone? Versus I'm talking about this person as if they were in the room. And then I said, well, let me just start asking to talk to these people. And some of them said yes. You know, and that's really how it happened. So it was part my personality, my background, and part like, we all talk like this behind the scenes anyway. We all have these conversations anyway. Why am I afraid to have them before the whole world? Either I'm in sin for saying this stuff privately,
behind somebody's back,
or maybe there's a fruitful conversation and dialogue to be had.
So do you ever feel like how do you feel when people are upset by that? Like your commentary, what is that? Like, does it make you say, well, man, I mean, it's true? Or like, you know, because I've had conversations with other people. Like I had a conversation with Jackie Hill Perry, and Jackie was just like, I just don't read comments. I just say what needs to be said and move on. And I was like, okay, that's perspective. But I'm just wondering how you navigate it.
I stopped reading comments as well. So I think there's a lot of wisdom in what Jackie said there. I sometimes can concede that I'm wrong. You know, I'm wrong. I'll give you a real deal example. I did a video on Mike Todd and the water scene. Do you remember the water scene where he had the water on the stage? The whole stage was flooded with water.
I vaguely remember that, yes.
And people were like, yo, you know, this is crazy. He's in this, and what would this cost? And this is over the top. And I did a whole video kind of doing that. And then someone was like, oh, this is the director for their media, and he just did a podcast, and that thing only costed them $500. You know, and so the very next day I was like, guys, I was wrong about Mike Todd. This is my bad. You know, this wasn't exorbitant. This is actually just creative engineering by creative people. Props to them. You know, so I've done that a couple of times where like sometimes I'm wrong. Sometimes I didn't get it right. Obviously, you grow in wisdom, and there's less and less of those times now.
Right.
And I have certain rules now where I try not to talk about pastors in general, you know, just because I think there can be like this weird symbiotic relationship where there's hate watching that happens of them, and then they get clout because there's hate watching, and it's just weird relation. I'm just not gonna play that game, you know, because it's ultimately all clicks, you know. So that's one of the things. Like I seldom really talk about pastors now, you know.
I was wondering why. I was going to ask you why'd you stop talking about pastors? Was there a particular situation, or like what made you say I'm not going to talk about pastors anymore? Because like
I met a lot of pastors that were great people. Because I started traveling and meeting megachurch pastors. Megachurch pastors, I wouldn't call them celebrity pastors, but they're celebrities in their communities. And I was like, the majority of these dudes are great guys who love Jesus. And my man Josh just recently did a video, and he said, you don't hear about planes that take off and land safely. You hear about the situations that are the worst of the worst. And I don't want to use my platform to color people's lens of church and pastors as just the worst of the worst situations. Now, there's certain things we got to talk about because they're in the zeitgeist, right? A Robert Morrison and what that happened with that situation. But generally, I just don't. And you end up meeting people, and you're just like, oh, like these folks really love Jesus, you know? I want people in churches, not out of churches. I want people to practice their faith, not become nihilistic about their faith. So that's something I've personally adjusted hardcore, is like, I just try not to talk about pastors as much.
The reason why I asked that too is because I think there's some people who are, you know, polemics is their thing. It's like finding what's not right and exposing that false reality or false doctrine and showing what is true. And I wonder, do you feel like that's a measure of who you are as a person, or is that because oftentimes we do something and we don't know we're kind of creating a culture. So for me, it's like I'm trying to infiltrate mainstream, but I'm also creating a culture where Christian artists think they must go mainstream. And so I wonder for you, because in hindsight, there's a lot of like Christian watchdog pages and YouTubers who all they do is like try to expose people. And I'm wondering how you feel about that, because, you know, I don't think you're malicious. I don't think that was the case, but I do think there's been a trail of people behind you who are like, ooh, this works.
That's it, man. That's a great point. Someone else brought this up to me. I think.
What's going on, y'all? So many of you have been watching episodes and trying to figure out how you can stay more connected, figure out what's going on. What do we do outside of this? Well, let me tell you, you're going to click the link below because that's going to give you access to everything you need to know coming straight to your inbox, and it is free.
Generally speaking, I think folks who are in those worlds are doing their best to be good Bereans. I actually believe that. I think they're really looking at the scriptures, wrestling with the scriptures and saying, is what we're seeing here representing these scriptures? I think generally that's the heart. Now, in that, you think you're totally right that you can create a culture of heresy hunting, let me expose the fault and the negative thing. And the more I kept doing stuff, I'm just like, we call it net positive content. So I'd rather highlight a pastor and says, look what he did right, than say, look what he did wrong. And so we made a hard pivot to move away from any exposure, this dude is wrong. About a year and a half ago, like no more celebrity pastor videos. Yeah. And if we're speaking on anybody, it's going to be a bunch of, look what they did right. Okay. They did this, and this, and this, and this right. This is good. This is good. Praise God. They said this, and this is wrong. But I understand why they said that. But but the rest of it. So yeah, net positive. That's what we've been trying to do. And generally speaking, if you look at what we do now, the overwhelming amount of it is net positive. With the caveat, like we just did a video on the Passion Translation. We just gotta have fun with that. Like, yo, this dude's story is crazy. This is a bad translation. Yeah. Don't read it, but generally it's going to be net positive. Yeah.
It's so interesting because I'll watch your videos over the years and I'm like, there are so many people commenting and having discourse in the section. I was actually shocked at the amount of engagement that was starting to take place, and specifically with young men, right? Like I was like, wow, there's a lot of engagement. And I noticed like you kind of started, I don't know if you noticed that you had young men chiming in or whatnot, but like over the last few years, Andrew Tate and other people, I guess Red Pill community folks have kind of exposed that Christians don't have any idea what it means to be a man, right? So a lot of these young guys don't even have a clue about what manhood is or what it entails. And so, one is kind of interesting that Christians didn't just toss this guy to the side and say, this is not biblical. But, that's interesting to me. But then at the same time, it's like, oh, they actually started latching on. And I would see people in your comment section, because you've made a lot of videos kind of exposing some of the errors. And there's people like challenging, like Christians, challenging this perspective. Like, what do you think resonated with him with young Christian guys? Like, what is that?
Yeah. Well, let me just go back and say this. In terms of the style of content I used to do, I am intentional of trying to befriend people that make that style of content now to try and steer them into a better direction, if you will. So a lot of the guys you see coming up bubbling, I tend to be friends with. And I've even seen some of the shift in their content. I think Andrew Tate fills a vacuum. It's like what we talked about earlier on our pod. Like there's a hierarchy, and there's power, and there's status. And if the church and Christians aren't leading in this regard, something else will fill that void. So once upon a time, we had that in the Christian space. We had and some of it wasn't all healthy, but we had the Mark Driscoll, the manly man style of content. And once that kind of slowly faded for a variety of reasons, what is going to fill that void is going to be the pagans. It's going to be the folks that don't believe in the same God. And so I think the Andrew Tate-ness of young boys, young men, one, he's mega viral. So it's just like, he's just ubiquitous. He's everywhere. Yeah. Two, he says some true things. Okay. He does say some true things about masculinity, about being competent, about being a leader, about being a provider. Those things, those are true things. But he says them through a presuppositional worldview that's so bad, that's so toxic in terms of, one, how did he get wealth and status? Through Cam, business, which is what he's getting charged with is digital pimping, right? Trafficking. And two, there's so much weird stuff that gets backdoored, whether that's some of his views about, women are property and not in a symbolic gesture of a, like so there's so many things that are getting backdoored. So it's like, again, can we acknowledge that there's truth to what he's saying? Can we acknowledge that there's a vacuum that needs to, that's going to be filled, and redirect people to what actual biblical masculinity is? And can we acknowledge that like there does seem to be a push from the left to like hyper-feminize boys, right? Outside of, you can get into the the trans stuff, but outside of that, like remove that, and just like the need to make men talk about their emotions more, the need to make men really value things that are the antithesis of being masculine, competent, someone that could provide. Those things get minimized. And so we have a culture now where, the college admittance rate is like 40-60% women, 40% men, 60% women. That's crazy. On a macro scale, that's crazy what's going to happen in terms of the downstream effects of that generations removed. So I think there's a lot of men that are hurting. I think there's a lot of men that are habitually online, and they don't know how to talk to women. They don't know how to marry a woman, to date a woman, provide for a woman. Andrew Tate comes alongside and says, it's not your fault. It's the Matrix. What a great messaging. Oh, and by the way, I have all the answers. Join Hustlers University for $50 a month. Like it's the perfect whirlwind. He's just enough truth. But you see what's happening with him right now. But again, we can't act like he wasn't speaking to real pain points, real things that men were feeling.
Right.
And I think the more we can acknowledge that, like, the world is changing, man. It's hard. It's harder for these guys today than it was for us. It's harder to date, to provide, to earn, to develop useful skills than it was 10 years ago, even 5 years ago.
Right.
And I think the more we can acknowledge that, the more we can get to of now they feel heard. I feel like Lecrae hears me because he could empathize with me within these areas. And then we say, okay, but you know what? The solution is really Jesus. Right. And the solution is actually in the scriptures, and you getting your butt in a local church and being discipled and learning some skills and learning how to handle money and learning how to work hard. And that's hard, man. It's hard because of how different the world has gotten.
Yeah. I was a product of that kind of Driscoll era and was grateful, regardless of all the chaos that he kicked up, I was grateful for kind of at least some kind of direction.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I do notice, well, two things. So I'm curious your thoughts on these two things. But I do notice on one hand, even the idea of masculinity, people revel. They're like, ugh, don't bring that up, like, because it feels like patriarchy. It feels like misogyny to even talk about what it means to be a man. Oh, you guys get everything. Here we go, another mansplain, another man conversation. And I'm curious of your thoughts on that, but then I'm also curious of where you think we go from here, especially with Andrew Tate probably getting locked up and going away, and there's not that, like you said, that zeitgeist, that voice that's everywhere talking about this. Like, what would you suggest in this gap?
Yeah. So the topic of masculinity, I think, is important, and the more we can define healthy masculinity, the better. Healthy masculine man is someone that's tough and tender, right? It's someone that could speak truth while at the same time being able to get on the ground and play with their kids. That's what masculinity is, right? And I think the framework of that is so lost in today's society. So yeah, I am as well grateful for Driscoll, and I am as well thankful that we grew up in an era that was a little different within the church culture, and that, I think, positioned me to speak into these things. And I think we need some of that back. But listen, there's natural hierarchy. There's natural like patriarchy in and of itself is not bad. Patriarchy just means that the household, the man is the head of the household. Why is that a bad thing? Right? Biblically speaking, the man is the head, as Christ is the head of the church. And then the very next verse goes, who lays down his life. So if I'm the head, that means I also got to sacrifice the most. That means I also got to lay down my life for my family. That means there's sometimes that I can't go after the ambitions that I feel like I have in my heart, that I got to hit pause and say, what's best for my family? I got to, so when you look at it from that standpoint, the man has there's a phrase that the red pill gets right. And I this might be controversial, but they said that responsibility without authority is slavery.
Responsibility without authority is slavery.
Yeah. So if you are always called as the man to take all this responsibility over your household and take all the responsibility, Driscoll said, it may not be your fault, but it's your responsibility, right? So we got to take all this responsibility, but you got no authority in terms of...
You're a slave.
Yeah.
You're a slave.
Right?
I see what you're saying.
And so so when I would go into these spaces and debate them, they would be like, yo, so do you have authority? And I'm like, what do you mean? And I'm like, if you were to tell your wife that you feel like God's telling you to move across country, would she be down? And I was like, yeah, like the way my marriage has been, we would pray about it and we would think about it, but there's been multiple, and that's not a veto card that I throw around flippantly, but like unequivocally, I am the head of my household. And I think some women act like they don't want that, like until they meet a man that's competent and they can trust, and then they go, no, that's actually what I really want. I really want a man that can lead me spiritually, make sure I'm taken care of financially, so I have the opportunity to be a stay-at-home mom for a season, if I were to take it, which by the way, 64% of women who work would have preferred to be stay-at-home moms had they been given the chance. That's not Christian, that's not conservative, it's not track on. That's women who work jobs. 64%, the lion's share would have been like, man, I would prefer to be home with my babies. Yeah. So I think most women actually want a masculine man. Some of them, unfortunately, have been indoctrinated by this idea that patriarchy is bad. But what do you get? What is the alternative? The alternative is going to be a poisonous patriarchy where now it's subordination. Yep. Which we don't want. That's real bad. Which I don't want to dunk on Islam, but that's kind of what we see in Islam, right? And or what are you want a matriarchy? Like you want women running everything? Oh, okay. Look at institutions where that's happened and where's that gotten us? You know what I mean? Because who's going to build the roads? Who's gonna take care of the infrastructure? Who's going to go and work on your toilet when you need a plumber? Who's going to build the houses? Who's going to be your electrician? And I'm not saying women, there aren't caveats that women do that.
Because they're coming for you now. Yeah. Just so you know, they're coming for you.
And that's fair. Come for me. So that we know that's not the world we live in. Like stop pretending. Stop pretending. We as men do a lot of the stuff women don't want to do. We go fight the wars. So again, like we have to acknowledge that and then say, now where do we direct people to? And what do we point people to? As the head of my home, like I don't be throwing around my weight and like, like I'm very gentle with my kids and my wife.
A leader, not a tyrant.
Yes, a leader, not a tyrant. Now you said like the Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate filled the void. And someone else will fill that void. Now, do you remember what void Andrew Tate filled? You remember who passed around the time Andrew Tate rose to prominence? Within a month or two.
Who's that?
Kevin Samuels.
That's right.
And Kevin Samuels.
That's right.
Would talk about. There's a lot I disagreed with him on, but Kevin Samuels would present this idea of an IKEA marriage, right? Where he would be like, "Yo, if you want a 6-figure man who's 6 foot tall, who's doing all these things, like." Are you the type of woman to attract that sort of dude? Yeah. Or you go build an IKEA marriage. You go build a marriage in your late teens, early 20s, where you just building it as you go. We gonna assemble the furniture as we go because we can't afford the real nice stuff to get delivered. We're gonna build it as we go. We're gonna go split this $7 coffee espresso because we can't afford one. Like, and if you think about like that's what my life was. I got married at 23, 21. We just built this life together. Yeah. Right? You got married in your 20s, right? Yep. Before there was money. Yep. And so broke, right? So I think that's the alternative was Kevin Samuels, who was way more sensible than Andrew Tate. He passes, Andrew Tate rises to prominence. So what do you think is going to happen when Andrew Tate goes away? Oof. Someone even more toxic is going to rise to prominence. Someone else is going to fill that vacuum. And if Christians aren't having these conversations and aren't exemplifying this, it's only going to get worse. The tough part that is for me, and I would love to hear your thoughts, is I don't like putting my family online. And the thing I get back from all these men that are kind of like red pill adjacent but Christian, like my man Zuby will come over and he just wants to just hang out with my family. And he'd be like, bro, we need to see this. Like, we need to see more men, and we need to see you with your wives, and we need to see you with your kids. And I'm like, I don't want to put that stuff online. I feel weird. I feel icky, especially in light of like the family vlogging thing that happened. But I think that these men need to see that. Like, they need to see competent men that love Jesus, who can care for their wives, that are providing. And I think if we don't step up, something else is going to. And we saw that already with the transition from Kevin Samuels to Andrew Tate. We saw Samuels, who got a lot of it wrong and had some real wonky views, but he got some things more right than Tate. And then Tate rises up, and the man's a complete, what he's getting charged with for the trafficking and stuff.
Yeah, that's a very. I mean, as for me personally, I am probably. Well, my wife doesn't like being online because she feels like the standard is so high. She's like, I am not the communicator that you are. I don't want to be positioned as like the perfect wife because you come off as this. So, she's like, I'm not Priscilla Shire. You know what I'm saying? So she's like, I don't want that pressure. And then for my kids, the only reason why you don't see my kids as much, I've done a couple little vlogs with them, but it's because I want them to experience being their individual selves, not Lecrae's son or Lecrae's daughter.
Yeah.
So I want them to have that freedom to be themselves and not have to live under the weight of whatever my name carries. Obviously, hopefully they get to a place where they're like, man, I'm grateful that this is my dad and I want to live under that, but I don't want them in their developmental stage to feel that pressure, that unnecessary pressure.
Yeah.
So
I think that's fair. I'm the same way.
Yeah.
So I think it's a tension. And this is why I tell people, like, be in a local church, because I'm not going to put this stuff online. But if you come to my church, I'm very accessible. And you see me with my kids every Sunday. You see me pulling up to kids choir with my 3-year-old while my wife finishes. You see me with the young adults. And I think my push is like, get into a local church, get into a healthy local church and do life with men that are a season or two ahead of you. Yeah. And that's where this is going to be more caught than taught. Andrew Tate can't teach you how to be a man.
Yeah,
but that can be taught in a local discipleship. And again, I just think this is stuff me and you had that a lot of these guys that are just habitually online don't. A lot of guys going to church online. Like, I'm not your pastor, bud. Like, go get your butt in a local church.
Now, what do you say to the idea that, because I've heard people say like, well, this whole idea of biblical manhood, biblical womanhood was kind of created not very long ago, right? Like, these books that were written about it are fairly new concepts, or the term egalitarian, complementarian, all these are not like, this is not like something that is a part of the Council of Nicaea, so to speak, right? And there's also, pushback on just the concept of like, wait a minute, what do you mean the head of the house? Like, what are you talking about? Like, God used this terminology. He's not necessarily a man because God is not a man. So he is more of like a zoomorphic, like he calls himself an eagle. He calls himself a lion.
God's non-binary.
Yeah, I mean, so but these are real pushbacks, right? And I wonder, like, to a woman who is saying, I've only experienced abusive power. I've only experienced a church that saw me as nothing but potential Jezebel, so stay in my place. What do you say to her? Like, she's wrestling with a sense of identity. So do I not matter if I'm not, connected to a man? Like, what does that look like? And there's a scripture that I'm like, I don't have nothing for you when I see it. When it says for, I feel like it's Corinthians, I might mess it up, but essentially it says for man was not made for woman, but woman for man. And I've seen women just like, what? What does that mean? How do I process this? And I'm like, so I just wonder for you who's had to probably walk in those waters a little bit more, how do you deal with that?
I think honestly, the best way, and this is not a cop-out, but I think the best way is to go and be around women in a season where they're loving motherhood and they're loving being a wife, and just sit with them and see the flexibility that it brings to homeschool your kids, if that's what you want to do, to be home, right? Like, to see how different life is when you don't got this worker bee mentality of both of us got to work so that both of us got to have a job and have a car and have transportation, and then your life is versus like a slower pace of life where like my wife is home, and I'm around, I'm active, I'm present. some of that, I think women need to see an alternative of like what that actually looks like. And I think what tends to happen, and I'm not saying this as a way to diminish, but there is something to an ideal that you have versus what happens when biology kicks in and you actually have kids. And you think you want to be this boss babe your entire life. But the truth is when you push out a human, that's a different type of connection you have to that human that is even hard to explain and use words to quantify.
Yeah.
And I don't know, there's exceptions to the rule. There's definitely women that just got like an incredible entrepreneurial gift that are like, they're just wired different.
Yeah.
But that's the exception to the rule. That's not the rule. The majority of women, again, according to the data, once they push out a human and they feel that connection with a baby, they're gonna be nurturing, and they're not go back to work in 6 weeks. Excuse me, go back to this rat race pursuit of trying to create the most amount of GDP economic output so that we can have 2 houses and 2 homes. And I just think it's not realistic to the wiring we have and the biology that women have. And I think if you're not connected to women who've had the opportunity to just be moms for a season, all of that can be foreign. Now, my wife isn't just a mom. My wife runs the day-to-day stuff of our household. She works on our books to make sure all of our payroll is done. She designed the inside of our prayer journals, our leadership planners. She's doing my devotional. She's very creative and gifted. But it's like there's seasons for that. And she has zero desire to ever work outside the home. My wife went to college educated. She made more money than I did for the first couple of years of our marriage. And as we've been positioned to this, like, it's just not, she would never want to go back to that. You know, she was a teacher at one point. So my advice to women would be like, get around other women and see that firsthand to experience it, and don't look to the exception to the rule. And then I would say, like your value is not defined by whether you're married or not, or whether you have kids or not. Absolutely not. But if you desire to be married and desire to have kids, you have to take inventory and say, what's the optimal way for us to build a life together? That's optimal for my family, optimal for my husband, my kids. And for some women that are entrepreneurs, I've had to tell this to people like, y'all just need to get a nanny. Like, I get it. You're not wired for this. I'm not going to shame you for it. You're built different. And God's giving you some gift. Like, to then figure out how to get a nanny and figure out some, if that's what you want to do. But generally speaking, I think most women don't do the calculations properly of like, I'm going to go in debt to get this degree to then become a stay-at-home mom in my 30s. That doesn't really make sense. And brother, I'll tell you, I don't know about you, but in our local community, we are dealing with a lot of women who went to college, racked up a bunch of student loan debt because that's what they were told to do, only to come home in their 30s and to be moms and to love it. But now there's the financial strain of you got to pay that money back. So it's like, I'd rather just be honest, and if they hate me for a season, they'll love me when they're in their 30s and be like, Ruslan was right. Ruslan was right about some of this stuff.
I haven't had to, like, I have friends who are married to the woman that you're speaking about in terms of like, they push back on these concepts and ideas.
Do they have kids?
A couple of them do, but it's not boded well in their marriches. Like,
it's not boded.
Right.
Okay.
It's
elaborate. Why don't you?
Well, I'm just saying they have kids, but there's been a tension of like, hey, I feel like this is how things should be, or I want this to happen, and there's just way more tension in the marriage because there's a redefining of roles, and and again, it's just never been my struggle. My wife, we came from that, what people would say, the traditional kind of church environment, you know what I mean? And even when we started exploring, like, wait, what do we believe and what is this? She never thought about her role differently, and she doesn't desire to. She's like, she'll actually say, I do not want to be the leader in this house. She's like, that's too much pressure for me. You got it. But that's not the norm, especially in cities like LA or New York or, even Atlanta nowadays, where what I'm seeing is you have a lot more women who are single in their 30s and 40s because they've been so career-oriented, career-minded, and,
so then what's the conclusion of that? You gonna be 50, single with a cat? You know what I mean? So like what? Like I'm not trying to be mean, but like where does that get you? What does that get you? You know? So it's like, and so here's a couple of things I want people to think about. You said L.A., New York, Atlanta, major cities. Okay, what is life like outside of major cities? Okay. Second, you said modern. What was life like 500 years ago? What was life 300 years ago? You think women was out hunting?
No.
You know, you think women was out?
I'm sure there were some exceptions.
There was So it's like, were there women out hunting? Maybe, but that's the exception to the rule, not the rule. So what we do is we keep trying to look through our modern lens in our metropolitan era and looking at the exceptions to the rule and trying to make them the rule. It's like the person who has a thyroid condition and is incapable of losing weight because of that. And then you take that person and you say, well, there's no way I can lose weight because, no, you don't got a thyroid issue.
Yeah.
You just need to eat less and move more, right? Like stop going to the exception to the rule for the rule. Like that's disingenuous to good faith critical thinking, right? Yeah. And so I think it's like we always want to do that. And it's like, generally speaking, there's an order. There's a hierarchy, and those will exist. And to get extra biblical, like what do we see as the curse in Genesis 3? The work is going to be thorns and thistles and toiling for the men. So work is hard. That's a byproduct of the fall. And what do we see for the woman? She wants to take the authority and usurp the man's authority. That's exactly what we're seeing played out. But now the consequences are higher. Now the consequences is, hey, you can't change your mind at this when you're 50. And then say, now I want to have a baby. Like that window is going to close. And so think about this stuff in your 20s and don't let the culture indoctrinate you into wanting to be this boss babe. Now, again, what I'm not saying is if women who have an entrepreneurial gift should suppress that or bury. That is not what I'm saying. Right. I'm just saying life is long. And there's certain things that are more optimal to do earlier. And again, my position, this is not the typical man up. Oddly enough, you guys, I did a conference called Man Up, which I thought was great. This is not the typical man up, but I do feel like when women meet a masculine, competent man that is able to provide, this is going to sound harsh, but they tend to submit and get in order. And so to me, the callback is always going to be like, well, men, are you becoming the type of man that can provide for a woman? Because I'm seeing young adults who can. And guess what? Their courting and marriages are very different. Their wives are very comfortable with being like, why am I going to go out? This is proven in the data. Women who are lawyers in their 30s, biggest drop off of women from the career field is women lawyers. Because what happens is, statistically speaking, they're going to marry other men who are lawyers or professionals. So if we're making $500K a year and we're both lawyers, or we can make $250K a year and you're a lawyer,
and I'm going to stay at home.
I'm going to stay at home. Why am I going to drive myself into the ground working 70 hours a week to make partner?
It's not a healthy marriage.
It's not a healthy marriage, and I want to be with my babies. So this is statistically shown in the data of high octane, high output people who are in the legal world. Yeah. Again, everyone wants to be the exception to the rule, and it's like you just may want to think about these things. You might want to count the cost ahead of time, and look at Lecrae's marriage and look at these marriages of folks that have been married 20 years and look at their dynamics and look at how they've been able to build lives together, you know? And again, there's always the exceptions to the rule, but we can't look at the exception to the rule and think just because something is common, therefore it's normal. Just because something is common, that don't make it normal. 70% of Americans are overweight, 40% are obese, but that's not normal. Yeah. That's common, right?
Bro, what are you, Rain Man? How do you just have stats? Like this man just got stats. Well, you know, the statistically, 40%. I'm like, I can't remember the weather. What's the weather today? Let me look at my phone. You like, stats. Is that a gifting?
I don't know. I like numbers and I live in that world and I don't want to just say stuff and not show a quantifiable reason for why it's true. So, you know, you could look at, they say that dual income households tend to take home less than where there's a main provider. Like that's been proven out by the data because you got to have 2 cars, gas for both cars, more dry cleaning, more eating out, and daycare. Factor all those expenses in, and you're taking home less money than if one person was the breadwinner. But again, men become the breadwinner.
Well,
you know
what I appreciate about you, because this what we're talking about is even evidence of that, right? Like what I appreciate about you is that you give your perspective on a various different things, right? But you're not just lobbing out random opinions. You have done some thoughtful research to arrive where you are. Like, and similarly, I feel like in my music career, some of the decisions that I've made have been the result of thoughtful research. Like, I didn't just decide to like make an album that aimed at mainstream. It was like through reading stuff and arriving at a particular place. Unfortunately, though, for me, people just saw the fruit of my research. They didn't see the work that it took to get there. So it's kind of like they looked over my shoulders and wrote down the answers and then they don't know how to do the work. They just know the right answers. And then they're here. And I wonder for you, you're one of the bigger, people online who have commentary on current events through a Christian lens. But at the same time, there's now a ton of people who should not have a channel. Do you feel pressure to, like, does that create a pressure on you to like differentiate or like, wait, how do I let people know that this is not just my random opinion? Or because now there's a wasteland of opinions out there. And I wonder, do you feel pressure, dang, I got to have everything right? Or I even have to have an opinion on everything because everybody has an opinion on something. Like, how do you navigate all of that?
That's a great question. So one, to show people how I got to my opinion, this is why I'm doing a book and this is why I've leaned into long form conversations where you can really tease out and help people understand how you came to that, right? Especially a book is going to be way longer to articulate that, which is, by the way, like you trailblazed, with your books. So yeah, I think yes, absolutely. Going deeper, going longer, packaging it differently, and hoping to put something in people's hands of like, even me saying like, hey, we got to be providers. It's like I'm walking people through a framework exactly on how they can do that, on how they can skill stack, how they can work on habit formation, how they can leverage flow state to develop useful skills so they can earn more money in the marketplace, right? Because it's just like telling dudes to make more money is like, well, you don't understand. Like, I come from nothing. How do you, right? And then I'm like, no, I get it. I came from nothing, and I'm going to help you walk through a framework to change your trajectory economically. So yes, I do feel a degree of responsibility. I do think that my role has been to behind the scenes play as big brother to a lot of these different channels and to help them and challenge them at times and encourage them at times and sometimes rebuke them at times about some of their framework. And then the boundary for me personally is we do Monday through Thursday. So my team comes in Monday through Thursday. We don't make videos Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So therefore, if something pops off on a weekend, I'm not going to just have an opinion for the sake of having an opinion. I gotta wait. I gotta think. I gotta marinate. I gotta pray. I gotta do research. And that's a parameter that I've set in my life. And we'll probably, truth be told, probably go down to like twice a week stream and then one podcast like this, just to kind of, like you said, like hone in so that it's not, I don't need to be first anymore. I don't need to just get the viral video. I'm looking at the longer play. That stuff's cool for building a YouTube business, but building a YouTube business is not a sustainable enterprise. YouTube is really just an outlet to get people into your ecosystem. And as we've pivoted, that's what we're looking at long term is like, hey, this is just one component of messaging. So the parameter, the boundary is Monday through Thursday, and that's it. And then there's stuff we have a nuanced take and we get in trouble for. I'll give you an example, the Olympic thing with the alleged trans fighter. And then the people jumped out the window and then you found out, wait a minute, no, this person comes from a country that doesn't allow any type of behavior. Yeah. And the dad's coming out and saying it's a girl and been a girl since birth. And I had a contrarian take to the rest of the Christian, world. And I was okay with that. And it was like, hey, at best, this person's intersex, at best. Now, we could talk about should an intersex person with an XY chromosome be allowed to fight, but that's not the same as Lily.
She lied. She's a transgender.
That is not the same as that. So, and then I had so many people flood my DMs, but one specific person was a girl who's been a girl her whole life, But she found out later on in life that she had an XY chromosome and she was technically intersex. And she was like, thank you so much for how you spoke about this, because this is like this secret I'm keeping. She's an athlete, and she's not a D1 dominating and dunking on women type of athlete. She probably has some competitive advantage, right? So that's a way where like I'm okay with just taking a contrarian take and having my audience hate me for a video. I think that's good. Like, because then you're just creating a cult. There's a cult of personality. Yeah. I could be wrong, or you should be able to disagree with me on something. And that's healthy. That's good.
Yeah. No, I think that's helpful, man. And I would hope that you do get some of those resources and things out there. And I like that you said that, because a lot of people just jump to trying to be first. And it's like, and you haven't put any thought in. And I've gotten, I've had to like scale back and say, wait a minute, something just, when I was speaking out about people being murdered by police or different things along those lines, people say, wait, why haven't you said anything about this one? And I was like, I haven't researched that one.
That's good.
I don't know the details about this situation. So, because everyone is just jumping to the conclusion, and it's like, wait a minute. As I'm doing my research, maybe this doesn't line up particularly as you're saying it does. And, again, like I said, man, it's a lot of opinions out there. I've seen prophecies about me and opinions, and I'm like, for you to take your time and to put some research into it. So people may still disagree, but they're going to have to deal with the fact that you've got stats, you've got research put into this. Yeah. Another thing I'm curious about, because we were talking a little bit earlier about like the Andrew Tates and whatnot, and just men kind of looking for what it means to be a man. But I'm also seeing like something that I hadn't seen, that I wish I would have seen kind of in my younger years. And that was kind of this like rise in curiosity of Christianity amongst like public figures and voices, right? So like for Russell Brand and like Jordan Peterson, which I'm kind of not sure where he's at, but you may have a thought on that. I'm not sure, but he's very open to dialoguing about his faith. Even Joe Rogan is like constantly asking questions. Like maybe you can speak to them specifically, but I'm just wondering collectively as well. Like, what do you think is attributes to that?
I think what's attributed to that is the rise and the fall of the new atheism. I think the new atheism promised us 15 years ago that we were going to secularize society, we were going to pull religion. It was on the backdrop of 9/11, and it initially came out railing against Islam, and then it was like, oh, but Christianity's bad too. So you got all these dudes railing against Christianity. Yep. And making society more and more secular and more, and then what happened was now look where we are. Right now, so less God, less Christianity, more secular, more atheism, and are you happy with the society we got? And so you're seeing the heads, like the big what is it? They call them the four horsemen, right? You got Richard Dawkins saying he's a cultural Christian, and granted, he said that before, but he's saying he's a cultural Christian, and he's alarmed that churches in the UK are shutting down and that there's 10,000 mosques being built. Again, that vacuum of power, something is going to fill that void. It's either going to be conservative Islam or it's going to be leftism. And you, Richard, you don't really want either of those. And he's selling you so much, right? He's afraid of what is coming. And so he wants the Christmas carols back, and he wants the beautiful cathedrals. And it's like, you can't have that without Jesus, right? You want the fruits of Christianity without the roots of Christianity. And so you're seeing him in real time coming to saying these things. Then you had Ayaan Hirsi Ali, who was she was going to be the fifth horseman of the new atheist. She comes out and radically gets saved. And actually made her first public proclamation at the art conference in London in November when I was there. Jordan Peterson's conference. She made her public declaration there. Wow. She's a woman that grew up Muslim, I want to say in Sudan, and then was an atheist for decades, and then recently became a Christian. Richard Dawkins interviews her, and she's like, no, like this isn't cultural. Like, I believe this stuff. I'm going to church. I don't have all the answers for you. So you're seeing that world fall apart. And then what you saw people that just kind of got in line. So like Rogan shifting, I think some of that is because he moved to Austin. So you're around different people. You're not in, one of these major cities where everyone is just, well, this is what it is. Yeah.
Yes.
So he's shifting in real time. He probably will call himself more of a deist or theist probably now.
So Rogan is at a place of deism.
I would think so. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. He's definitely doesn't seem to be an atheist anymore.
Okay.
And it seems like he's shifted probably to agnostic deism. Jordan Peterson, his wife miraculously got healed of cancer. She had a type of cancer that no one ever survived. And she tells him, I'll be fine by our anniversary, and starts praying and then gets radically healed. What do you do with that? And so now his wife is Catholic. His best friend, Jonathan, is Eastern Orthodox. His daughter's Protestant evangelical. He's writing a book called We Who Wrestle with God. I've had some private conversations with him that if he's not there, if he's not in terms of belief in Jesus, he's right on the cusp of belief in Jesus. Yeah, he's right there. And so what he's doing is almost like worldview apologetics. And you go to one of his events and it's eerily similar to a church service. There's a band, there's an opening speaker, then there's a 45-minute sermon, and then there's like this Q&A, and it's all about God. He talked about identity and where do we find our identity from? Like it's so I think there's something in the air because I think we got the fruits of atheism, of secularization, and we're like, we don't really like that. You know? Russell Brand reached out. I think we're doing something at some point. I'm going to go to London and sit with him. I think he had a real conversion. Like, I think Russell really got saved. Like, he got baptized, got saved. I think he had a real encounter. Now, I think the tough part is some of this is going to be overlapping with a lot of the conservative movement. And that may be off-putting to some people because it's just like on the left, right? You're like, hey, like, we should fix police brutality. And it's like, and then let's disrupt the nuclear family. Like, we're sliding in all these weird things that like, wait, I was with you on the, Now, unfortunately, you're going to have some of the same stuff on the right. And so I have to be careful to like, I'm not pulling up to the conservative conferences. Because the small fragment of my left-leaning audience that's still here, I don't want them to see this as this like theolitical gospel, because that's not me. Though I'm very conservative, I don't want to be. So that's the things that we're gonna have to work through. But I think you're right in that there's something in the air. There's a shift that's happened. People are hungry for something real. Gen Z is the most marketed to generation of all time. They're tired, they're exhausted, and they just want the real deal, and they want to be called to more and not less. The seeker model of, well, let's just get them in the seats and just give them an inspirational talk. No. The biggest resurgence we're seeing right now is in Orthodox and Catholic circles. Like, they're bursting at the seams with the amount of, why? Because they're calling people to more. Like, we fast on Wednesdays and Fridays. Get in line. You can't have communion here until you've been confirmed. Like they're raising the bar. And I think we could take notice from them as Protestants and be like, let's stop trying to lower the on-ramp for everybody and make everything easy. Like, nah, man, like, you can't be sleeping with your girlfriend if you're following Jesus. Cut it out. You can't be looking at porn if you're following Jesus. Cut it out. Like, you can't be getting drunk. Stop. And I think and I think that's what men want. I think that's why Driscoll was so successful. Like, you call men to something more, and yeah, they're gonna fall short in that attempt, but that's better than just like coddling them.
Yes. Yes. That's what I was going to ask you, because it's good for me. Even hearing this conversation is a good reminder for me, because I never want to coddle either. You know what I mean? But I do feel like oftentimes the culture can just be so, like, a lot of the younger guys that I've had the privilege of being involved in their lives have been so fragile. And it's like, dang, that messed you up? Okay, well, it's like, oh, God, I'm never going to live up to this standard, and I don't want to be the old head that's like, in my day, we ate the Bible for breakfast, boy. You know what I mean? I don't know how to, like, I'm trying to figure out, okay, how do I meet you where you are, but like give you the same nutrients? It's like, we just jammed a needle in our arm, boy, and I got to spoon feed you these vitamins. I'm wondering what your experience has been, because you're a lot more direct. You know what I'm saying? And I'm kind of like always processing and just like, well, maybe if I, I'm experimenting, and then sometimes I end up being like, nah, I'm just got the jam needle in his arm. Like, but I'm always trying to experiment.
Well, I will say, I think you and I both probably deal with people who haven't processed their own traumas and stuff, right? And so some of what you're describing, that fragility is like, yeah, we need to address that in like therapy. Like you need to actually go and work through these things, because I shouldn't be able to tell you like stop sleeping with your girlfriend and you collapse like I just told you. You know what I'm saying? Like we can't do that. That's something else you're dealing with. Like, and we got to get to the bottom of that. So I think advocating for therapy, mental health, dealing with your issues, I think is good. But I also think there's something in just the habitual building of our faith, meaning that if you don't do your programming, something else will program you. Ooh. So if you know anyone that's been to the California Correctional Facility, right? You know that a lot of them go in and you got to get programmed. And if you aren't programming, you're not going to be able to participate. And it might even be worse for you if something goes down. So it's like that mode of like, you need to be consistently doing something in terms of taking care of your mental health, your physical health, like your spiritual health, reading, praying. That consistency, we got to make that real practical for people. Yeah. What's the first 15 minutes of your day? Are you seeing sunlight? Are you going outside? Are you touching grass? Are you praying, right? And so I think that's where, unfortunately, the world yet again has gotten it right with stuff like Power of Habit and Atomic Habits. These are secular books, but they give a practice of how to build habit formation. And we don't talk about that enough, right? There's a beautiful book. I think you would actually love this. It's called Habits of the Household. And he talks about our lives as living liturgies that are daily. And what is a liturgy? A liturgy is something that you repeat over and over again. Yeah. And so like our lives and the way we eat together and the way we hang together, these beautiful living liturgies that we have. And I think that's where a lot of men who are fragile like that probably need some therapy, but they also like, hey man, like you need a daily routine. Yeah. You know, and sometimes if you don't have anything, that's really hard to do. Or if you have too much, that's really hard to do. You could be so successful that you're detached from getting up at the same time every day, you know? And so it's like, you got all this turmoil and it's like, dog, when was the last time you like went outside? Yeah. You know?
No, I agree. I tell my son sometimes, I'll say how you approach one thing is typically how you are going to want to approach everything.
That's right.
So if you get in the gym and you just kind of piddle-paddling around, that's the same mentality you're going to take at work, in the house, you know, just like, oh man, you know. But if you are tenacious here, you're more than likely going to be tenacious there, which is kind of a testament to like what we were talking about earlier. Is just like, yo, how did you get good at this? Well, I was doing rapping and then I just started doing this and then, you know, just tenacious at that. And
you got to choose your suffering or your suffering will choose you. Yeah. If you don't choose to self-impose adversity is going to kick you and destroy you. You know what I mean? So it's like, there has to be this, like, there's a quote I have in my book and it's, if you do what is easy, life will be hard. If you do what is hard, life will be easy. And Jesus tells us to follow him. We got to pick up our cross, lay down our life, right? He who loses his life will gain it. He who gains his life will lose it. And I think that is, especially what young men need. And I've been drilling that into my 9-year-old, like, you know, you got to be okay with doing hard things. Yeah. It's okay. That's good. You know?
Have you been, I'm assuming you have, but you've been, checking out like John Mark Comer because I know you gave kind of an interesting take on like the idea about rest from the ruthless elimination of hurry and living liturgies kind of has a little Comer like esque you know vibe to it. I'm just curious, like you challenged the rest ambition kind of idea. Can you break that down? Like, what's
well, I think generally speaking, everything John Mark Comer has said in that book was great. I think the idea that we live in a constant state of hurry, we're living, speeding somewhere to work and just always in this state. And that's not conducive to a godly life, right? So I think he's 100% spot on. And even in the book, he gives caveats of seasons of hustle. Right. And I think the issue with that book is it's gone so mainstream that book is for you and me. That book is for the guy that's done a bunch of stuff and needs to like turn off your damn phone. You know what I mean? Like, get off the internet. Like, that book is for us. That book is not for my 19-year-old nephew, Samaje, who just graduated high school, who barely can get to the gym. You know what I mean? Like, that book is not for him. And so I think what's happened with some of that is, like, you got folks that are in seasons where you need to lock in and be in a Proverbs 6 season, gazelle intensity, grind for a window, instead of, hey, I'm going to have this perfect balance of rest and this and that. And I think we should rest. I think rest is important. I rest a lot. I take naps. I sleep well. I take a day off every week. But there are seasons where opportunity may open up. Yeah. And you got to go for that thing. And that's not, every season shouldn't be that way. Yeah. But I think seeing what's happening and seeing what's in front of you, and I think so many folks are just like, I want balance. It's like, I don't know if we're promised balance in the scriptures like that. Like, we are commanded to rest, and Jesus is ultimately our rest. But this idea of, like, perfect balance, so it's like, yo, respectfully, like, if you've made a mess of your finances and you're living paycheck to paycheck because you got so much debt, like, you might really want to reel it in for 18 to 24 months, get on that Dave Ramsey, drink the Kool-Aid, all in, go all in like I did. And bro, I've shared this at my church before, but like, we found ourselves $100,000 in debt. I got sued. I found out there was a second mortgage on my taxes that I was responsible for. This is 2011. This is like when me and you first met, 2010, 2011. You remember I was on my Dave Ramsey Kool-Aid. Yeah. We got into an argument once because you were like, oh, I'm going to use my credit card and get these miles. I don't care what Dave Ramsey has to say. And I still feel like that, Dave. Talk to me. But we did that. We did that for a season, 18 months. $100,000 paid off. Then we had 6 months of living expenses. Then I can quit my job and go build a business. And you got folks that are afraid of, like, yo, you might need to work 2 jobs for a year. You know, and that's okay. You're not gonna fall apart. Like, so I think there's a time and place for that. So my concern with the John Mark Comer is just like people talking about it that, like, dog, I know you and I know the season you're in. Stop it. Like, you're in the season of you need to buckle down. You don't need to have this perfect balance of rest and turning off your phone and doing this and doing that. So that was my main concern, and because I think some of that can lead to and listen, like, brother, that's a really privileged position to be in. To be like, I'm going to turn off my phone on the weekends, and I'm going to make sure that I have no apps on my phone, and I'm going to get a dumb phone because I can't control myself when I'm on my regular phone. It's like, or, right? Like, isn't that like, who is that written to, bro? That's written to the dude that's already doing 6 figures that can't balance anything. Right? Like, that's who that's written to. And again, I love John Mark Comer. No, this is no dig at him. He has a caveat for everything I'm saying. There's a caveat in the book. I quoted it up. There's a caveat for all this. I just think that when something becomes so mainstream in Christian spaces, then everyone is on this, like, thing. And it's like, yo, some of y'all need to, like, work. Work for 18 months, clean up all your debt, save up 6 months of living expenses, and you'll be shocked on how less hurried you feel after you do that for a season.
It's funny you say that because I did that. John Piper wrote Don't Waste Your Life. That was not for me. And I didn't realize that. That was for, like, old, rich, privileged men who were trying to focus on retirement. And I'm sitting here like, forget money. And it's like, brother, you have debts that need to be paid. You know what I'm saying? He was writing to people who, like, I just can't wait till I can take a cruise every day and not have to, and just be on the golf course. And I'm sitting here like, don't waste your life. And it was like, oh, I didn't get that. You know what I mean? So I'm like, he's like, man, I gave away my $4 million book deal. I gave that money away. And I'm like, well, I'm giving my money away. Lecrae, you have $4. Stop it.
Your kids got to eat.
You know what I'm saying? So I can see the point in that. I was curious because, and that actually makes a lot of sense. Like, and you saying that there's caveats because I was late to the John Mark Comer train, so I didn't even catch that. So when I hear about you addressing it, I was like, oh, that was a thing. I like the minimalism thing. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm starting to see like, and there's benefits to it, but then there's also extremes to it. And then it's like,
all of these things are addressing first world problems from a place of privilege. Even minimalism. Like, you got too many things. It's like, okay. That means that I'm so materialistically successful that I got to go through my possessions and get rid of stuff. That's a very first world problem to have. Now I'm a guy that like I wear Jordan 14s, Jordan 11s, Jordan 12s. That's it. All my other shoes, I'm very particular in that, like, yes, quality over quantity, right? So I like it, and I was on the Minimalist podcast. I like it. I love it. But yeah, I think you're totally spot on. It's like certain things are written for people in specific seasons, and they become so ubiquitous, and we just like run with them, and it's not for everybody.
That's amazingly true. What are you up to now? You know what I mean? Like, what's going on? What's the future looking like?
Yeah, I just finished my very first devotional. It's called Occupy Till I Come. So it's 60 days through the macro narrative of Scripture, like all the big stories, through the lens of Jesus's words in Luke 19:13, which is the parable of the 10 servants. It's like the Luke version of the parable of the talents. Okay. But in the Luke version of the KJV, Jesus says, instead he says, do business with this while I'm gone, he says, occupy till I come, which I think is that's just hard to me, like the idea of like occupation here. Yeah, and it's in the context of him coming back, right? So like he's coming back to move away from this Christian nihilism that we're seeing and this Christian apathy. We have to be faithful with our time, talent, and treasure. So I wrote a devotional going through the overview of Scripture in 60 days. That's also packaged as like a journal, so there's prompts. So I'm like really excited about that. We have our leadership planner that came out, our prayer journal. I'm trying to genuinely give people product that solves their problems, of problems I wish I had. I wish I had someone to take me through the Bible in 60 days in an interactive where I'm reading and I got to fill out prompts and give me the lens of stewardship for my finances, my time, my talent, I wish someone did that. So I'm just really trying to reverse engineer. So we got like a prayer journal. We got that. I just finished my book. We're on the second draft of revisions for it. That's coming out next year. So there's a lot of cool things in the pipeline. We're starting to own our own like supply chains. So like I have relationships with people now overseas so that we can bring the prices down so that people can actually like, I want our stuff to be cheaper than the Moleskine journal. Like I want I really want to provide value. Like I saw the video, I don't know if you saw this, but it was the dude who owns Arizona Iced Tea. And he was talking about while all inflation came up in food, which some of that was straight, like they knew they can raise their prices, right? He's kept Arizona Iced Tea at 99 cents. And I was like, that's so dope as an entrepreneur to be able to do that, you know? And so I like, instead of raising prices, what if we lowered our prices for the things I really believe people need, which like, I wish I had a fire prayer journal. I wish I had a leadership planner. So I'm like really trying to make stuff that helps people and get the book out, which is gonna be about some of the stuff we talked about. Music, that I'm always releasing music. I'm trying to figure out how to integrate it more, almost like a brand integration into the videos. Yeah. Because people don't even know I make music, but then like I'll play the music during the countdown of my streams, and the chat is always like, "This is you? Like you make music? This is fire. Why don't we know about this?" Yeah. So I almost feel like it's been a disservice to not tell them about the music. But then I started getting asked to go speak, and I'm getting these offers in to speak, and people are like, "Can you do some music? Can you do some music? Can you do some music?" And I'm like, "All right." And I'm cool. Like I was cool with being I was cool playing the background. Hey. When Gibbs was popping off in 2015, like I would just fall back and just be the business guy. Yeah. And every time I have that posture, like God seems to kind of resurrect the music stuff. And so I'm not chasing it, but there is stuff coming out. And Bless God Summit, we're gonna do that next year. I think March, doing our first live 3-day conference, 2.5-day conference. So there's a lot of really cool stuff in the pipeline, man. So I'm just trying to be faithful. And I've always, coming from communism in the Soviet Union, I've always knew of how fortunate I am to be in America and how, if we're talking globally, like to be alive in this time with this opportunity, I've seen myself as the guy with 5 talents. And that to me is a heavy weight. And so I don't want to bury anything. I want to be faithful and never at the expense of my family or my local church commitments. And so that's what I'm trying to figure out. And thankfully, we got money to pay people now. So it's not bootstrapping it. Like I could actually pay people to help and do the right things and not like, give me a favor, man. Can you help? You know, Lecrae, send me a free feature. You know, why don't you put me on? Like you was talking about in our conversation. So that's where I'm at, man. So it's been a fruitful season, bro.
I'm appreciative, man. I'm again, bro, it's like, it's always good to kind of hear how people are growing and maturing in different ways. And where you are now, I wouldn't have imagined in 2011. You know what I mean? But I I noticed that, man, you were entrepreneurial. You know, there was a season of time when we were even kind of like trying to figure out what you as an A&R looked like. You know what I mean?
I brought y'all Paul Russell.
He did.
I brought you Paul Russell.
he did.
Lil Boot Thing, Paul Russell.
Lil Boo thing.
I was just talking to Ace about that in the back.
What'd he say?
He was like, man, I just didn't see it, man.
Yeah.
He wasn't a Christian rapper. I was like, man, we could have all been rich. Well, you already rich. We could have been more
Richer?
rich. We could have been richer. Yeah, but shout out
man.
to Paul Russell. Paul is a talented dude. But yeah, I think
I forgot about that scenario, and I think Ace hit him up and sent him a song like, "Yo, what you think about doing the song?" And
he hopped on it was the Christmas album?
No. This is after Lil Boo thing.
Oh, after,
popped
okay.
off. And Paul Russell's like, "Yeah, I'm not gonna be able to do it."
Oh, really?
But I don't think he was like on some like, "Now you want my feature?"
He did just say yesterday to me that he's trying to be very like particular on what people can expect from him before he branches out. But one of the things we've talked a lot about, hopefully he doesn't mind me saying this, is like, hey, like, you need to make sure that this comes full circle to a Jesus moment. Like, you need to, like, we're not gonna not talk about Jesus, you know?
That is the
because he's a bona fide like pop act now at this point, you know? And it's dope to see him and to see guys like Jake and to see folks in that world that are Christians that are like this is what I've always dreamed of, is like seeing these brothers legitimately predominantly non-Christian audiences. And Jake just did the song with Forrest Frank, and so it's like dope to see him start talking about his faith more.
Yep.
But that's dope. Yeah. So to be fair to Paul, so I do think he's trying to be very particular now, so that when he kind of shows these different sides of him, because he could do folk, he could do like this first demos I heard from him were like folk songs. Yeah. He's so talented. So yeah, man. But the music thing is fun. I just, I think you guys have a grace over y'all where you guys know how to deal with creative people. It's like you guys are Maverick. Y'all got this, like I was with Norm and them yesterday, Tribal. Like, there's a way to maneuver like creative people. And I got burnt on that, bro. I got tired.
Well, artist problems become your problems a lot of times. And so it's like, if you're not wired for that, I'm fortunate to have a team. So it's kind of like I can manage an aspect of that.
Right.
It's like having 2-parent household. It's it's not just me having to deal with that.
And my pastor asked me like, hey, like I was like a fork in the road moment. This is after Gibbs and the Dream Junkies. And I was like, man, do I want to keep working with artists and doing music, or do I want to go down the path of YouTube? And this is before I had 5,000 subscribers. Yeah. And my pastor looked at me and he said, what would be best for your family? And I knew right there, I was like, I can't keep doing it. It's just too much, So you guys have built great systems and infrastructure to do that sort of stuff. And so, yeah, props to everything y'all have built, man. It's beautiful.
Honored. Well, brother, it's been a pleasure. You know what I'm saying? Having you on. We could talk forever.
We'll do this again sometime.
Yeah, all I would really want to talk about is why I didn't move to San Diego.
You got to move back, bro.
I can't. I have so much square footage with these 3 kids. I can't imagine. I cannot imagine having to downsize with 3 kids. Maybe after my kids are gone, I could do it. But
yeah, our place is substantially smaller than any house I've been to in Atlanta.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's substantially smaller.
Exactly.
But I will say there's nothing like waking up, going on a walk any day of the week.
Don't start.
The weather is the same.
I don't want to hear this.
We're 15 minutes from the beach.
I don't want to hear this.
There's nothing like it. The food.
Oh my gosh,
it's
great.
Great.
Tacos alone.
Yeah, it's great, but it is more expensive, and California is weird right now. It's just a lot of crazy stuff happening.
It's
so
true.
we flirt with the idea, but yeah, man.
Yeah, bro. Hey, what's going on, y'all? Are you enjoying this conversation? I would imagine you are. Okay, well, Ruslan has some questions for me as well. And I'm giving him some answers I've never given the world before. So make sure you head over to his channel to hear that conversation right now.